Number 8. A menu of the ship's last meal. Have you ever wondered what was on the menu of the biggest luxury ship in the world? Well, you're about to find out. People worldwide are still fascinated by the Titanic 104 years after it sank, not only because of the giant scale of the tragedy, but the Titanic's tale is one of old world valor and nobility. Still, though, it's a tale of old world class differences. Consider the first, second, and third class passengers eating menus. The comprehensive list of options included several courses described in a menu in the Titanic's wreck. First-class passengers had access to a whole host of different kinds of delicacies, and even though the second-class menus were slightly less fancy, they still had delicious dishes. These would include roasted turkey with cranberry sauce, spring lamb with mint sauce, and baked haddock in the sharp sauce. There was also plum pudding and wine jelly. On the other side, though, the third-class menu seemed more like slop for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Anyone up for some cooked potatoes and rice soup? The important thing to remember is that the Titanic was thought to have the best restaurant on board, and this example does support that claim. For one lunch, over 40 different options for meals were actually available, and that's just in one meal of the day. Just for the first class, though, and it sounds crazy to think about. Number 7. Bronze Cherub. A bronze cherub would be part of the Titanic The Artifact exhibition, formerly shown at the Luxor Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. The cherub is a component of a lamp that was left by the staircase that connected C deck to the promenade deck. Although they could be seen all throughout the Titanic, cherub statues were most adorned along the 5-level grand staircase, and which one specifically is up for question. According to CNN, one opinion is that it originated from the higher level of the grand staircase in first class because it's smaller than the cherubs on the main staircase landings. The statue's torch and left foot, which may have been lost when it was yanked from its place, is missing. And with the release of James Cameron's record-breaking box office hit Titanic, this cherub gained notoriety. It was the perfect romantic background character as Jack courted Rose on the grand staircase. Some mistake this big cherub for a smaller one that's been recovered from the ocean floor. What's terrifying about this religious iconography is that it's being used as a literal center of such an enormous tragedy. Cherubs are usually known as the bearers of the throne or creatures who attend to God, and some people take this religious figure to have a deeper meaning. Before the Titanic had set sail, it was often claimed that not even God was capable of sinking the boat. However, some religious people saw grave blasphemy in these claims and believed that God would not let this go unpunished. Many people would even be convinced that it was actually as much human pride that was the reason behind the sinking of the Titanic as it was God's divine wrath. Was the cherub surviving all these years in the wreckage and eventually being found a religious message? Nobody can say for sure. Number 6. Titanic Radio. Now, before you say anything, let me just be clear on this. The radio is a piece of the ship that has not yet been recovered. However, it still deserves an honorable mention on this list owing to its contents and importance along with implications. Whether or not to retrieve the radio has been the focus of a very long ongoing debate. Known in 1912 as the Marconi wireless telegraph machine, this radio aboard the ship sent distress calls to nearby ships when disaster would be spotted. This would save the lives of around 700 people who could get on the lifeboats and be rescued. Supporters of the excavation would argue that it's extremely important to salvage it before it's lost forever. Underwater footage shows that the machine is covered in rust and may soon become undiscoverable if action is not taken. However, the bodies of many of the people who perished on the ship have never been recovered, and the debate is because there might still be remains of the victims down there. Lawyers have been arguing against the retrieval of the radio as the dive plan did not include the prospect of there being human remains. However, and moreover, to retrieve the radio, they would need to cut into the ship's radio compartment, and that's something that's strongly opposed by preservation advocates. It's uncertain whether the radio will ever be recovered and brought to the surface in the near future, but one thing is for sure, it will be very chilling to hear the voices of the now perished and take a peek into what went down on that fateful day. Number 5. A shoe. A man's shoe is one of the rarest to be shown of the items that were recovered from the Titanic because of its deplorable condition. At first glance, it may seem like a torn and worn-out shoe, but if you look more closely, you'll uncover a lot more about it. This poorly preserved men's leather shoe only consists of the welt, top cap, and partial quarter with the insole, and looking at the man's shoe reminds you of the very real people who were involved in such a colossal disaster. It's easy to overlook the impact that the event has had on each person aboard the giant steamer, and to get lost in numbers and statistics and just the magnitude of it all. But it's equally terrifying to think about how the thousands of people felt in those long and painful moments leading up to their death and destruction of one of the world's largest structures, and it reminds us of the countless people who had hoped to begin a new life in America but never made it to the shores of the free world to start their new way. The fragile condition of the ship just adds to the feeling of the unrelenting nature of the ocean and the gigantic waves that the giant ship fell victim to. Number 4. Sheet music played by the band. The band's sheet music was miraculously retrieved from the North Atlantic. 2 pieces of music, On Mobile Bay from circa 1910 and Put Your Arms Around Me, Honey from the Broadway show Madame Cherie, have been found amongst the wreckage. The second item belongs to Howard Irwin, who was on a Friends Round the World trip, and the Titanic's inaugural voyage was to be the last leg of their journey. Irwin, on the other hand, did not make it on board. He may have been robbed just before the Titanic had sailed, but both his buddy and his goods made it on the ship. Henry Sudahall Jr., Irwin's companion, tragically perished in the shipwreck. Knowing the kind of music being played on the ship takes us one step closer to imagining what it must have been like aboard the Titanic. Even though the luxurious descriptions sound amazing, what follows is one of the biggest tragedies that the world has seen to date. Finding out more and more details about the journey really just makes the tragedy seem so much more real and bigger than one could have ever imagined. Number 3. The telegraph. Unlike the radio machine that has not yet been recovered, the engine telegraph was amongst the ship's machinery that made it back to land. This artifact would be found in 1987, and the machine was used to relay commands to the engine room. It was used to communicate with all of the crew on board and connected them to the engine room, and this telegraph was likely the device that was used to communicate between members of the crew when the iceberg was spotted and the chaos began. It's believed that this played a central role in the collision of the iceberg. However, while it's still unclear what exact orders were being given from the bridge to the engine room and vice versa, one thing that has been agreed upon is that the Titanic slowed down after the collision. This means that whatever orders were being relayed took too long to be received. The ship struck the iceberg 37 seconds after it had been spotted, and we all know what happened next. Number 2. The hat. Another one from the collection of personal belongings retrieved from the wreck is a bowler hat. This bowler hat would be recovered in 1993 and is still in surprisingly good shape, given that it was discovered surrounded by wreckage on the ocean floor. Little is known about the hat's owner, but as hats were a fairly popular male adornment of the time, any of the hundreds of men who were on board could have worn it. It's unclear who the hat belonged to, but the tragedy of all the people on the ship that night still remains the same. Number 1. Keys. Numerous lives would be saved thanks to this unique set of keys. Samuel Hemming, a crew member, used them to retrieve the lifeboat lanterns that had been used to help individuals leave the ship with illumination. The lanterns were kept in a room below deck, so Hemming had to take a life-threatening danger into his own hands to get them. Hemming was saved from the sinking ship and lived the rest of his life with the 3 keys in his possession. Before being purchased by a private collector, they were passed down through the generations, and it's not only these keys that have been put up for auction. In 2016, a Titanic locker key would sell at auction for $100,000. It's amazing to see parts of the stories that we've been hearing all of our lives and have watched in the movie, but it all begins to feel too real and too close to home. Real people, more than 1,500 lives, were lost in one night. Unsuspecting visitors out at sea caught the cruel wrath of nature. That's it for today, my friends. I hope that you've enjoyed watching the video. Comment down below which artifact gave you goosebumps watching. Share it with your friends and subscribe for more videos like this one in the future.